Hello, this is Cho of the Shiny Colors Discord. Happy 5th anniversary to the Idolmaster Shiny Colors. By the time of this upload, it should also then be the anniversary in the States as well. So whether you're a new producer or you've been here for a while, glad to see you. Let's go ahead and talk about a revised version of arguably one of the most popular videos on the channel. Let's discuss team building in Shiny Colors. So first off, what exactly is team building in this game? If you're not familiar, Idolmaster Shiny Colors is a producer sim, rather than the rhythm game that many have come to expect of Idolmaster. This means you gather up cards, be it produce cards or support cards. Think of it like characters versus equipment. You produce your produced cards in a mode of your choice in order to create a Fest card. These are what you use in various game modes that require Fest units. Your team, that you will eventually get to put together, consists of 5 different characters in any combination that you prefer. Characters of the same unit will typically have certain levels of synergy, which we'll get into later. But of course, in order to begin putting together your team, you have to produce your cards first. And of course, the big question is, who should I even produce? Well, let's go ahead and take a moment to take a look at every single unit in Shiny Colors and talk about what make them unique and their playstyles that might fit a player like you. Starting of course with Illumination Stars. Illumine's primary playstyle centers around unit synergy. Being the starter unit, or signal trio depending on how you feel, means that they're designed as easy to pick up and play and help teach players many of the ins and outs of gameplay. While many later Illumine cards help branch out their concepts, they are a unit that play off of each other's strengths at the end of the day. They're great at all stages for both learning and improving, and because they're a 3-member unit out of your 5 characters, it means there are 2 additional characters that you can use as kind of flex positions in order to adapt or adjust the playstyle that you think Illumine should go for. Next up we have the 5-member unit, Antika. This unit is best known for their disruptive nature, and emphasize a slower fest through their ability to both debuff rivals and judges. The first unit to pioneer the concept of revenge appeals, which depending on who you ask may also be known as backwater, that scale based on how much missing HP you have. They also have interest down to fortify judges, attention down to draw attacks their way less often, as well as many other types of debuffs. If a team that emphasizes slow play as your style, definitely give Antika a glance. Our third unit is Hokago Climax Girls, otherwise known as Hokura, or HCG. Hokura are best known for their explosive, high-risk, high-reward playstyle. Many Hokura cards focus on being in the limelight, raising their attention to find themselves targeted for attacks more often, but have found ways to benefit through appeals that scale based on how high your attention is. They're ideal for players who want a fast and loose playstyle that throw caution to the wind in favor of hitting real hard. Next we have Alstroemeria. Alstro centered their playstyle around safety, incorporating health recovery and appeals that scale based on how healthy they currently are. Many of their strengths revolve around the early game, making them a less risky approach to a fast fest compared to a unit like Hokura. 3-member teams offer more flexibility, so consider Alstroemeria if you're not much of a risk taker, but absolutely want to get the job done. Next then we have Straylight. Seen as a parallel team to Illumination Stars, Straylight aim to create synergy between unit members in their own ways. The most notable trait for Straylight cards are teaching players about active buffs, which is how many of their appeals scale. By removing a set amount of active buffs, their appeals grow in strength, and the best way to gain them is through your unit mates. If you like a team that is a bit more combo-oriented and likes certain orders in order to make a huge payoff in the end, Straylight might be a team to check out. Next we have Nocchill. The 4-member unit of schoolmates find their way through Fest with a few unique abilities associated with them. Reaction, otherwise understood as evasion, allows Nocchill to avoid taking damage from judges, and have found ways to buff themselves for successfully dodging. Some other variations of Nocchill forego reaction in favor of taking damage and being buffed for each hit. They also have certain buffs that may have an activation point that has an infinite buff associated with it, but that buff goes away if you take damage, playing into that more defensive evasion-based playstyle. If you're somebody that wants a little more luck in their play, but slightly more rigid in their playstyle in regards to how to get things going, Nocchill might be a team for you. Next, we have the sole duo unit of Shiny, Shees. Shees are notable for their supreme levels of team flexibility. Many cards between these two intentionally buff the other member specifically, creating a very insulated playstyle. On top of this, most Shees cards also have passives that ask you to have a variety of different units represented on your team, resulting in a team that is both solid as a rock at their foundation, but can easily swap pieces out in order to both adapt to the threats in question, but also to take full advantage of all the buffs that they have available. Lastly, introduced this year, we have Luca Ikaruga, the first and only solo unit in Shiny. Luca, as a card, mixes and matches mechanics from existing units as we know her. From her debut SSR, she follows in Shees' footsteps by getting stronger for each unique unit on her team, and also comes with a unique interest block mechanic that prevents appeals on the wrong attribute from doing damage to a judge temporarily. Think of it like Wonder Guard in Pokemon, where only super effective attacks are the ones that will work on the target in question. On top of this, she also encourages slower play like Antika, meaning that she works well with low health strategies and can be a bit more defensive as well. If you want a bit of a wild card to throw onto your team, Luca might be somebody to consider. So now that we've covered the units, let's go ahead and talk about what goes into all of this. First off, we have to decide what the card actually wants to do, and thankfully, many produced cards have preferences. So an important aspect of deciding how to play a card is to see what stats they actually prefer. Our example above features a produced SSR for Kaho, who initially actually prefers using Vocal, but when upgraded specifically to 3 stars, gains access to Visual as an option. Permanent SRs and SSRs will typically grow to prefer up to 2 different attributes, while limited SSRs will most frequently focus on one attribute and get better at it as you upgrade them. Produced cards will also have access to either a Link Appeal, which requires their full unit to activate when conditions are met, or a Plus Appeal that requires more specific requirements without necessitating unit setups. You'll see this frequently on larger teams, so Fokura and Antika for example, but we've also seen this on Luca, as she does not have a unit to actually Link Appeal with. This was their answer to allowing Luca as well as other members to function without necessarily relying on their entire team. Produced cards will not only have appeals they can learn through producing, but also have passives and other things to unlock as well. The stars underneath the produced card's artwork represent the number of copies merged together, referred to in-game as evolution, but otherwise understood as either a number with a star, so 1 star, 2 star, so on and so forth, or LBX, such as LB1, LB3, or MLB when a character is limit broken, as the LB stands for limit breaks. Something that you may have picked up from games like Grand Blue Fantasy, for example. There are a few ways to evolve units, but the most common is to use exact copies of the same card. This is key to creating both strong produce and support idols by unlocking different abilities, or in the case of supports, allowing them to level up even more to gain even better abilities. Notice that Kaho's passives on the screenshot above are unlocked at 1 star and 2 star respectively, as well as the 4 star unlock at the bottom. This means you will need to get more copies of this character in order to unlock those kinds of abilities to use in produce modes. The last thing to keep an eye out with for produced cards are their memory appeal. A memory appeal is a large attack that hits all judges at once. It feels like a big super attack. The strength of your memory appeal depends heavily on your memory level, a stat that can be raised through correct decision making during a produce run. Memory appeals gain additional effects starting from level 3, and can get drastic boosts in power at even higher levels. Notice that Kaho's level 2 memory appeal does not have an additional effect, but starting from level 3, she adds attention buffs as she levels it up, increasing in strength as it goes. When looking at your idol's abilities from the Reminisce page while producing, you'll want to keep the color and shape of these panels in mind. But before that, you have to unlock them with SP, a stat you can gain throughout a produce run. Notice how each tile has an SP number on the bottom, such as SP40 or SP30. That's the amount of SP you will need to spend in order to unlock said ability. If a skill is grayed out, it means that you can't actually reach it yet, as you have to go for something prior to it. Usually, characters start at an SP20, and you have to work your way down the tree. The 3 different types of panels start with a pink circle. These are appeals. You can carry up to 4 appeals at a time, and these are used to appeal to judges in order to deal damage. You can also overwrite appeals, so that way if you run into something you don't want to keep anymore, you can just replace it with something even better. But do remember that you can't take that back, so don't overwrite the appeals you want to actually keep. Orange hexagons are passives. They may sometimes have an additional color to represent a second stat that they raise. Our example shows that it actually splits in half into purple, raising your attention. These have activation conditions that must be met before they activate during the performance, such as having all members of the unit on your team, it being a certain turn or before, or a certain turn or after. There are many different ways to activate passives, so make sure to read up on them to see if there's something that fit your team. The last are squares. These represent stat uncaps. By default, an idol can only raise their vocal, dance, visual, or mental to 500, but stat uncaps allow you to increase the amount you can earn. These are key to creating really powerful idols, so don't skimp out on them if you have the availability to buy them and you're real close to that maximum stat. Finally, gold or even rainbow colored panels are typically unlocked at 2-star through 4-star. You'll see these referred to as the gold passive or rainbow passive or 3-star, 4-star appeal. These are much stronger abilities that are typically the key strength to a card, and in some ways are almost the defining trait of the card themselves, making it a very important upgrade once you reach it. Next we get to talk about supports. Supports are similar to produce cards in that they carry appeals, passives, and stat uncaps. What makes them unique is that they have support masteries, as well as levels. These upgrade as you level up the card using your training tickets that you gain through dailies, weeklies, events, and so many other ways. Collecting additional copies increases the maximum level that your support can reach, allowing for even stronger masteries to be worked up to. If you notice, masteries will have a level that they are currently at, denoted in the darker gray, such as the level 4 that we see, or a level 3 that's grayed out, as we don't have enough copies of the character to access the ability yet. And as you level them up, you'll notice the max next to them as well. This indicates that there is only so many upgrades you can do for certain abilities, and they reach them typically every 5 levels. So the level 4 can eventually work its way up to a 6 once we get enough levels into the card. Support masteries are meant to improve upon your produce runs, providing additional stats or other various effects to make producing that much better. And they're definitely worth keeping in mind when selecting the supports you want to produce with. So now that we've covered produce and support cards, we gotta start actually producing them. For the modes of choice, you're going to start, of course, with Wing, the beginner mode. And the other modes all have their various strengths and weaknesses. We have videos on the channel covering each of the produce modes, so feel free to dive into those videos to learn more about each mode to see which one fits your preferred playstyle. Once you've produced at least 5 different idols, you're able to begin creating your fest team. Each of the 5 positions has a unique bonus, so make sure to use those as best you can. The leader, vocal, center, dance, and visual positions. Starting then with the vocal, dance, and visual positions. These provide a plus 100% bonus to their intended stat, or a 2.0 multiplier if you like that kind of math instead. Notice the jury on the right here has 776 vocal normally, but when in the vocal position, it's increased to 1552. It's very important for your main attacking idol to be in the right position to increase their strength. If you have a character that hits really hard, it's probably best to put them in a position that allows them to hit even harder. The affected stat for any of the positions are highlighted in pink, in case you keep track of which buffs you're actually getting from certain positions. Next we have the leader position. This provides a 100% increase to your mental stat, again a 2.0 multiplier. What's also great about the leader position is that it improves your idol's passive activation rate by 50% of their base. For example, if you have a passive that has a 30% chance to activate, increasing it by 50% isn't actually 80%, but it increases it by 50% of 30%, so 15%, meaning that the passive now has a 45% chance to activate, rather than the 30%. A 40% becomes a 60%, a 50% becomes 75%, so on and so forth. Leaders are meant to carry as many important passives as they can use them best. That doesn't mean your other positions can't have strong passives, but the leader is the most important one of all to make sure that all of your really good passives stay on your character. Lastly, we have the center position. The center provides a 50% increase to all appealing stats, or a 1.5 times multiplier. Centers determine the memory appeal for your team that we mentioned earlier, dictating the strength and effects when you decide to use the memory appeal. Centers are an ideal card to build a team around if you want to think of it like a pillar. In order to make use of the explosive effects, a lot of times memory appeals require the full team to be as strong as possible. So, if you place a strong center, it's definitely a good idea to build around them. Expanding on to that, centers are not the only units that affect the memory appeal. The multiplier that you see next to the heart at the bottom of the screen here is determined by the collective memory level of the other 4 members of your team. This multiplier increases the damage your memory appeal can dish out, making your strongest attack even stronger. The handy chart on the right shows the number of percent that is increased by the level of each character. So, level 0 and level 1 memory appeals provide no bonus, a level 2 memory appeal adds 0.02%, a level 3 0.03%, level 4 0.05%, and level 5 0.075%. The maximum possible bonus is a 1.3 times multiplier to your memory appeal. It's also worth mentioning that the collective stats shown at the bottom bolster your entire team's performance a little bit. It's not just completely determinative of the character's individual stats, but the pooled stats also provide some level of bonus. So aim even higher as you choose to raise your stats as best you can. The final effect your idols can receive in FES is the same unit bonus. This adds an additional 20% or 0.2x to your position bonus. So that means your vocal, dance, and visual position bonus is no longer 100%, but 120%, or 2.0 becomes 2.2. Notice on the left here, we have Asahi and Juri initially. Then, when we place Kaho in the vocal position, not only do we see the indicator pop up on Kaho indicating the same unit bonus, but we see Juri and Kaho's stats go up in real time, while Asahi's stats, as she is not a member of Hokago, do not increase at all. This bonus activates as long as you have 2 members of the same unit on your team, so take this into consideration when building teams with less than 4 members. 3-member teams are able to utilize 2 additional spaces, so your Austromeria team could choose to bring along Juri and Kaho, or say Mono and Meguru, whoever you feel fits best for your team. To conclude this section, keep in mind that a common trapping for newer players is the idea that you have to utilize every single position bonus. The strongest teams in Grade Fest have rarely been what we would refer to as a rainbow build, which means having a vocal unit in vocal, a dance unit in dance, and a visual unit in visual. This makes building much smoother if you decide to focus in on that one attribute that works the best with the pieces you have. The example above uses Hokura, who have a lot of limited time SSRs that focus in on vocal. Many other teams will have other attributes they work with best. You'll see players refer to them by the attribute as well as the name of the unit, sort of mixed together. So, in case of here, we have Vocal Hokura, or Vokura, or Vokago. You may hear Da Chill, which stands for Dance Knock Chill, Vo Stray for Vocal Stray Light, so on and so forth. This makes building so much smoother and leads to a generally better experience with Grade Fest as a whole. It'll also keep your pulls focused too, in case you're somebody that's completely indecisive as to what exactly you want to pull. Once you find a target, it's definitely good to narrow in on what makes that target really good, and see if you can find other cards that complement the card in question that you think is really cool. So now, let's talk about something very important, and it's something that will help you both as a player, and will also help make things easier for somebody like me, who loves to talk about these cards. Because a lot of times people will ask me, well, what makes a card good? What makes a card bad? That's what we're going to talk about here. Good positional units, so units that can go in vocal, dance, or visual positions, not the center or leader, will typically have access to AoE, or Area of Effect appeals. These attack all judges at once, rather than one judge at a time. You can recognize AoE appeals by their icon. Notice that Mikoto on the left has visual appeals that have 2 music notes on them, as opposed to the Asahi below who only has one music note. Double music notes imply AoE attacks, so in this case, Mikoto has a visual 2.5 appeal that hits all judges, and a 4.0 appeal that hits all judges. If they have high multipliers on any of their appeals, for example, Asahi's Dance 6.0 or Vocal 7.0 are seen as incredibly high damage, and amplifying that damage in the correct position will be a surefire way to do a ton of damage to a judge. If they have ease of access to said multipliers as well, regardless of AoE or single target, also is a pretty big factor. Sometimes cards can be a little too complicated to use in a position, or, depending on the cards you have available, might just be impossible to use correctly. Notice how Mikoto's AoE has no additional condition, making her a great visual unit, while Asahi's appeal is noted by the pink letters that indicate a visual up or dance up depending on the appeal you look at. This means you have to actually remove these buffs in order to see that 6.0 or 7.0. And if you're unable to reach those, you're looking at something as weak as a 1.2 or 1.4, making it a hilariously weak attack. When an appeal strength is written in color, in this case a pinkish red, this indicates that the appeal scales with some sort of additional parameter. We've seen appeals that scale based on attention up, attention down, we've seen it increase by the number of active buffs you have available, by the amount of evasion you have, so on and so forth. So make sure that these conditions are easy for your team to establish, or else you might find disappointment when trying to use the card and feeling like they're underperforming. Next, let's talk about centers. Centers will typically have a high multiplier on either the initial appeal or the link appeal. Remember that for link appeals, you need the entire team on your skill history, in other words, they've already participated in the fest by attacking, in order to activate the memory appeal. If we look at Kiriko's, her memory appeal's link requires Kogane, Mamimi, Sakuya, Yuika, and Kiriko. Now, the character in question using the attack doesn't have to be already on the history. So as long as in the last 4 turns we attacked with Kogane, Mamimi, Sakuya, or Yuika in any order, then Kiriko will be able to link appeal. Her appeal is a Vocal 3.0 that follows up with a Vocal 5.0 that gets stronger with the lower attention you have. This requires a tiny bit of setup, but Vocal on Tika, her preferred team, has great ways to access this, making it extremely powerful. In contrast, we have Kaho, who has a 200% attention debuff for 3 turns, followed by a Dance 8.0 that scales based on how high your attention is. This can be seen as relatively hard to use, but what's really neat about it is the other bonus to it. To get back on track, we've talked about the high multipliers, and we've also talked about the ease of access. One thing that is very interesting is that the buff greatly benefits a following link appeal, making it an okay option too. Sometimes you'll see memory appeals split by 3 different types. A buff into an appeal, such as Kaho's, an appeal into an appeal, such as Kiriko's, and sometimes you'll see an appeal into a buff. Those are seen as not as good, but the other 2 are always solid. The bonus is if you have a character that is great at level 3. This is where Kaho comes in. Kaho's memory appeal stays a Dance 8.0 regardless of what level it currently is, while the debuff does not change between levels 3 and 5. This means that her memory appeal is effectively just as strong at level 3 as it is at level 5, which is great if you're building specifically in the produce mode step, which is notoriously very complicated to get a level 5 center. The greatest advantage to building and seeking out a center is that ideally, they will not need to actually use their appeals for anything. This means that even 0-star versions of characters can be great centers if the values they reach are strong enough. Just be mindful that you'll need to raise that memory level to reap the most benefits, so make sure to practice your morning commus or keep that notebook handy to see the answers. Now, checking for good supports. Supports can be split into 3 categories according to attribute, of course. So you'll have good and bad vocal supports, good and bad visual supports, good and bad dance supports. You may even find the occasional rainbow supports that are able to support multiple attributes that can have positives and negatives associated with them. If your support has passives of a high value, which is of course subjective to your available cards, they are definitely a card that's worth considering. Wanderlust Mamimi is an example of a support you consider for her passives. Her 2-star passive, which is a Dance 100% up if you're below half health, is still a very usable passive on teams to this day, despite being a card released back in 2019. Generally speaking, for Grade Fest, anything over 50% is generally good. And if you can raise the floor, so if your lowest passive is say a 70%, then that might also be a pretty good benefit. Just don't choke yourself out of all of your passives if all of them are relatively weak. Everybody has to start somewhere, but this is a great way to see where your team is progressing. Another great aspect of supports are their support masteries in order to help build your cards. Things like SP masteries, room masteries, or stamina masteries are great things to keep an eye out for in current day. Suit Madoka is an example of a support you consider for her support masteries. While her passives aren't particularly good, her masteries make builds both consistent and powerful, having access to a lot of different stamina, having access to some levels of dance points, as well as SP. And then of course, passives that synergize with your ideal team. If we take a look at Mamimi again, being below half health is great for Antika. It's pretty good for teams like Hokura, who get hit very often because of their attention, and might be good for teams like Dance Knock Chill specifically, who do find themselves being hit a lot more often. So that's kind of an idea of base level synergy from one unit to another. Support cards are a whole other facet of the game to factor in, as you bring 5 of these along with you on every produce run. The difference between a leveled support and a non-leveled support is night and day, and turn grueling produce scenarios into a piece of cake. Don't be surprised if cards happen to only have good masteries or good passives and appeals. Some of the best teams may only use a support because their masteries are insanely good. Madoka, again, is a very good example of that. Her passives aren't super strong, but she's helped build some of the craziest dance teams in recent memory, making her a good support to pick up, which is also especially good because she's permanent, meaning she's always here. Let's get into a couple ideas of things to look out for with your supports. In the earlier days of Shiny Colors, selecting supports based off of your unit was a bit more recommended. Nowadays, the two major factors are what kind of masteries a support has for building your team up, and how their passives can be activated to play into your strengths, like we were talking about earlier. Let's go over a few masteries you'll want to keep an eye out for when deciding on cards to bring. And thankfully, you're able to search up any of these abilities on the Shiny Colors wiki. You can type in the English name for them, such as Room Mastery or Dance Mastery Stamina, in order to find these on the search bar for any of the cards available. So, if you're stumped as to which ones your cards have, as well as the in-game filter for it as well, you can check these out and see what you have available. The first one is Room Mastery. This skill, when active, automatically levels up a room or a facility that the idol is currently in. So if a room is level 3 and it activates, as long as they're in there, it's forced to level 4 as long as it's successful. Combining these with EX skills that allow characters to be in a room more often than normal can help level up important rooms much faster, for more efficient stat growth. Next we have Stamina Mastery. These are skills that do not have an activation cut-in, but rather apply when the support is in the correct room, or when your idol shares a room with them. This reduces the stamina cost for a specific room by a set percentage, allowing more frequent use of lessons or job sites. These types of masteries can be related to rooms, such as Vocal Mastery Stamina in the case of Asahi, Visual Mastery Stamina in the case of Nichika, or sometimes it's related to the units, such as Juri, who has Unit Mastery Stamina, which decreases the amount of stamina cost for every unique member of Hokura in that room at the time, which does apply to your produce card too if it's a Hokura card. Next we have Stat Mastery SP. This mastery, along with masteries for Vocal, Dance, Visual, and Mental, raise a particular stat by a set amount. So Vocal Mastery Vocal plus 15 would mean you gain an additional 15 Vocal if you're in the Vocal room and take a Vocal lesson with them. SP specifically is the most important stat to try to gain during a run. It's how you access all of your passives and appeals, and is usually the most in demand. This can appear as lessons, worksite, or unit masteries too. So, for example, you could have Vocal Mastery SP, Radio Mastery Mental, Unit Mastery SP, so on and so forth. Next is Perfect Mastery. This mastery, when active, guarantees that the room the support who activated this in will have a perfect result, as long as, again, you don't fail it, like we talked about earlier. Perfects double the amount of stats you would have gained, which can be a godsend for raising your stats extra quick. In certain modes, this also increases how much experience you gain for specific rooms, meaning you'll also level up rooms faster. Paired up with this, sort of, is Excellent Boost. This mastery increases the effectiveness of Excellence for the idol in question. Excellence are a special bonus that your support cards can have when the bar above their head is above half, so at 50 points or more. This increases the stat growth of the room they're occupying by 20% per Excellent, and this boost further improves that multiplier. Excellent also grows in strength at the level of Idol's Bond, pairing well with high-level supports. Next we have Audition Mastery. For those that prefer to stay in Wing over the other produce modes, Audition Mastery provides additional stats when ending any audition in first place. This is ideal to bring along for the sake of true ending, as earning additional stats such as Mental, SP, or your main and healing stat allow you to keep auditioning without taking breaks to do lessons. Stamina Support is a support skill that works great in conjunction with the previously mentioned Stamina Masteries. When active, this reduces the stamina cost of all rooms that week by 50%. Stacking this twice makes all rooms free for the week, but also each activation makes Stamina Masteries go from only reducing the stamina by a set amount to even recovering stamina, making it great at staying in lessons more often. Lastly, we have Know-How Discovery Mastery, also referred to as Know-How Mastery. This support skill increases the likelihood of know-how appearing at the end of non-step produce runs. If you're completely unfamiliar, I absolutely recommend checking out the step guide if you're kind of confused. This so far is a skill available through Grade Fest supports only, making them contextually limited, as the supports are only available in the shop for 6 months at a time. They're ideal supports to bring when preparing to build in step, and are absolutely useful when gathering up a ton of abilities in various modes to make some of the strongest idols possible. Whether you're trying to climb to the top of the leaderboards or just want to learn how to use the cards you found in the best way you can, team building is important. But most importantly, fluid. You'll almost certainly be finding ways to move cards on and off the team until you find that one piece that solves the metaphorical puzzle. Don't be afraid to ask questions about your cards, or see if other producers can help steer you in an ideal direction. And have fun with it. Thank you so much for sitting through this entire video. I'm sure it has gone entirely too long at this point, but these are all the things that I think you'll want to know if you really want to start digging into producing and building a strong team in shiny colors. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave them in the comments below. I'm sure other producers alongside myself will be able to answer whatever questions you may have. Till the next video, have a wonderful 5th anniversary in shiny colors. I've been Sho. Thanks for watching. Have a wonderful rest of your day.